I've had some business development trips in India with my partners here based in Hong Kong, Australia, and Singapore. And they were just blown away with how so many matters are being solved by the Indian judges in one single day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Super Lawyer YouTube channel. Today we are delighted to welcome Urvashi Salecha ma'am. Ma'am is the legal manager at Harney Westwood Riegels, which is an offshore magic circle law firm, and a dual qualified dispute resolution lawyer licensed in India and Hong Kong. She has a strong expertise in international disputes, cross-border insolvency, restructuring, and has worked across multiple global jurisdictions. A university top ranker, CIArb and INSOL certified professional, she cleared the Hong Kong OLQE in her first attempt and has worked with several top-tier law firms. We are pleased to have you with us, ma'am, today. My name is Anshi and I work as an associate with the Super Lawyer team. At Super Lawyer, we showcase inspiring journeys of legal professionals, offering valuable insights that greatly motivate and benefit our readers, which are young lawyers and the legal community at large. Thank you, ma'am, for being with us today. I request Divya ma'am now to please continue with the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Anshi. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you, Urvashi, for being here. It's a pleasure for me to interview an overseas lawyer, and that too sitting in Hong Kong, having that particular difference in thought process and the kind of lawyers we have interviewed till now. You are, I guess, the first one for me to interview from Hong Kong, and I hope you are going to enjoy the conversation. So let me start with telling you about myself. I'm Divya Dwivedi. I head the Super Lawyer team, and I'm very thankful for Anshi to bring you here, and thanks to you for giving us time. So I'll start with understanding about your career trajectory, which is absolutely inspiring. And as Anshi introduced, that you have been a gold medalist, you have been a topper. How and when you decided to do this, and what was the motivation behind doing law and taking up law as a career, and then evolving to such heights? How have you gone through this whole challenge with, I would say, such ease? Please let us know.
Thanks so much for the kind introduction to Anshi and you. To be very honest, I'm pretty junior. I feel like I've just started out. There are miles to go before I sleep, to be honest. So there is obviously a lot to do. But, as you said, I'm probably the first lawyer from Hong Kong that you've spoken to or talked to. And Hong Kong is not the usual or a typical choice for someone from India looking for an international law career. So nothing riveting here. I moved here for personal reasons. And in hindsight, it was the best God gifted career destiny turn for me. So the reason why I'm here and why I do cross-border laws, as you say, is that although I'm Hong Kong qualified, I work at an international offshore magic circle law firm. By offshore, what it really means is we practice BVI, Cayman Islands, and Bermuda laws. And again, as soon as I say these jurisdictions, Indian lawyers may say, oh, what's this, tax havens. And I say, no, this is not that. These are tax efficient jurisdictions. And you wouldn't believe like how efficiently they work and how they're based on the UK common law system. So it's essentially doing three different kind of jurisdictions, but based on UK common law. So it's similar to anybody who's also looking for a career in the UK. In fact, all these law firms have their offices across the world, but mostly their head offices being in London because they're common law based. So how I got into this is because it's a big story, but long story short is I moved to Hong Kong around 2020, and that's when the pandemic struck. So it was not only that I was reintroducing myself as a lawyer and having the pedigree of Khaitan and Co. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself, but let's just get into what probably will be more relevant to everybody around here, because you may have interviewed a lot of Indian Magic Circle lawyers. But what happened was that from being a Khaitan and Co associate, having a strong pedigree, I had to reintroduce myself as a disputes lawyer. So this experience, the Indian law experience, is not really something that the recruiters are looking at or law firms are looking at, because what they want is an international qualification, either UK or Hong Kong, or the other thing they want is like a good experience in an international law firm. I had neither. and pandemic struck. So people who had jobs were getting laid off. So amidst all of these challenges is when fortunately I found this role with Harney's. The reason being that language is a very big issue in Hong Kong as compared to other jurisdictions. So the Hong Kong law firms require trilingual ability, which is Cantonese, the Hong Kong dialect, Chinese, which is Mandarin, the mainland China, and English, of course. The reason why I chose offshore or happened to find opportunities within offshore is twofold. One, it's a more global law firm. So I'm not restricted to just being in Hong Kong. If tomorrow I want to move to Singapore, Dubai, or anywhere else, I can use the same skill set and move abroad. The other more important one being it's a more international space because we're practicing common law and UK systems. We don't really always need the Chinese language skills. I mean, it's better to have because your clients are Chinese, but at the same time, you're practicing English common law. So language does not become a barrier to your elevation or your success. So I think these were the two major reasons why I chose an offshore law firm.
And again, I'll ask you why and when you decided to do law, what was the motivation behind
Oh, yes.
choosing law? Because that is
Yeah.
still considered an unusual career, even though times have changed and things have started changing.
I actually always wanted to be a lawyer, which is very rare. Anybody from my school, if you ask them, they'll be like, oh, she's that girl who wanted to be a lawyer. Why I wanted to be a lawyer is nothing to do with what I'm doing right now. But I really liked debates. I liked speaking. I liked elocution. And I thought law was all about speaking. And this was, again, a turning point to know that law is actually more about writing, especially if you're in private practice. Again, a skill that I feel people don't focus on a lot. And that's when you come to these international law firms, you realize, oh my God, this is something you really need to work on because the emails are precise, succinct. You want to make sure that it's easy for the client. At the same time, you're covering all points. So specifically in terms of private practice, it turned out to be like a very important skill. Like writing skill is the skill you need to hone. But I joined because I really liked speaking. I'm a first generation lawyer, so there was nobody to look up to as such. But my initial career plan was actually to work within the Indian judicial system. So I wanted to take up the judiciary exams. Obviously, an international law career was intriguing, but it wasn't the plan, to be honest. So, yeah, it's a mix of destiny and then you choose your path, and it's choice and design both combined.
So, since you digressed from your first
Yeah,
choice of joining the judiciary, how
yeah.
has this particular career treated you? The kind of things that you have done, the way you had planned has changed, and you are now sitting at a place where you can decide many things first for yourself. So, how do you see this particular career plan has made you and given you your name, and the kind of transition that you did from taking up
Yeah,
judiciary to getting into
I
private
know.
practice and being an international lawyer?
That's right. Wow, that's a great question. What really happened was, I mean, it's also a personality trait. Like a lot of people like to be organized and stick to their plan. I, on the other hand, I'm a little bit more of a flexible personality type where I feel like if I get an opportunity, I want to grab it and I want to see what I can make of it. So I'm not very rigid. I think that's what helped me so fluidly move across and transition to a rather challenging jurisdiction, I would say, especially for lawyers. I don't want to give the beautiful picture to everybody. Oh, it's so fun working in international law firms. It is, it's a great opportunity. I don't think I could have ever imagined reaching this space. But at the same time, there are lots of differences. So obviously, Indian judiciary was my first part because I wanted to serve people. And it's not like I cannot go back to judiciary again. You never know. At some point, life changes and there are turning points, and I may come back. But the differences between this transition from domestic to international are that obviously, in terms of just generally getting out there, because it's so challenging, it makes you grow a lot. So I think if I were in India and with Khaitan, that was my first role, my first law firm role as well. Not that I wouldn't have done well, but it's just that I would have been rather relatively comfortable. But here I was just out here. So there were a lot of skills I gained, like the first very big one being the art of networking. And I think that's what got me to Harney's as well, because the usual routes were not working out. Like recruiters were not interested in you because you're not qualified. At that time, I wasn't when I was looking for roles. So I think that's one key skill that I acquired, which is reaching out to people, making connections, making a network for yourself, finding mentors. And my only acquaintance in Hong Kong when I moved was actually my husband, who's a banker. So the only professional acquaintance I had. So I think the fact that I was just literally put out in the loose in this field and then had to figure out, I didn't even know what offshore law is. So obviously, I think it was great because it just helped me grow so much as a lawyer, not just in terms of technical skills, but interpersonal and communication skills as well.
What a beautiful journey, and the way you have transitioned is something which takes a lot of time for people to do, because there is a lot of difference in not only culture but the way people network here and network outside India. We have heard this from many international lawyers that something which we miss in Indian context is the
Yeah.
art of networking, and that's something which gets you to places where people have not imagined even. And like you said, you never had planned for this, but it happened. So currently you are more focused on cross-border insolvency litigation as well as restructuring. You have also practiced dispute resolution, as you said, in Khaitan Company in India as well. What difference do you see in these two legal systems of Hong Kong and India, including the three countries that you practice being an offshore lawyer? Is there any specific practice that is followed, or is it that you design it for yourself and for the company that you work for? And how was it in India? And how do you see that you took this journey? How did you learn that? We would request you to share something about that.
Thank you so much. I mean, these are great questions and often asked by a lot of people who work in India and want to know how it is in these other common law jurisdictions. So instead of saying Hong Kong or BVI, Cayman Islands, Bermuda, or the UK, I'll just treat all of them as one bucket because they are very similar as against India. Although India is also a common law jurisdiction, the practice, procedures, and especially case management, I think that's one very key distinctive factor between these two jurisdictions. So, firstly, in all these common law jurisdictions, pre-trial settlement is extremely incentivized in the sense that at every stage, and even the rules and procedures, like there's something called as pre-action protocols, the parties are actually required by law to first explore settlement through negotiations. So I think that is one key aspect, and these are taken seriously. It's not just for the purpose of, oh, because it's a rule that we need to explore this, we'll do it. All parties, and even now, I'm working on 3 trials, for example, at the moment. There were 3 hearings that I was on, 2 of them went ahead for settlement, which is great because that lessens the burdens on the court and it just makes a more efficient resolution of the disputes between the parties. It saves costs. So I think that's the first thing. The second and more important thing in terms of case management would be just the trial timings. For example, a matter does go to trial in the UK or in the Cayman BVI. What the judges will do is they will set a specific week or maybe 2 weeks if it's a very complex matter. And that entire time is completely dedicated to only that particular matter. So everything from evidence to final hearing will take place in that week or those 2 weeks. Or maybe they keep it like in tranches. So there's one quarter will have 1 week, another quarter will have 1 week. What this does is that you actually get a very good chunk of the judge's time to delve into the matter, to figure out what's happening, and then to finalize everything, instead of, say, 2 hour slot in between of 10 other matters. So I think that's one very important key difference between the two because it's more efficient, it gets sorted faster, you're focused on that specific matter. So you're not like asking the same questions again and again, hearing after hearing. So I think that was the case management is way more structured, more mature. And thirdly, I think there's one more thing is that the pre-trial alternate dispute mechanisms like arbitrations, they're taken extremely seriously by both the parties. So unlike in India, the arbitrations don't very often go to courts for challenge. Like in India, I've seen a lot of times if there is an arbitral award, it'll by itself be challenged. Like you're almost expecting, they're not expecting a challenge to take place in court. whereas that's not the case in these other jurisdictions. And I think one small point, which obviously I think a lot of people would know as well, is adjournments. How common adjournments are in India as against adjournments here. Like, if there is an adjournment, it is likely to be because both the parties have contested to it. So, it's at the behest of both parties consenting to it. Sorry, not contesting, consenting to it. So, I think that's again a mindset issue of the adversarial parties in these jurisdictions as against Indian adversaries. So it's a little bit of both. Obviously, I really don't want to underplay the Indian judicial system because they are heavily loaded with cases. Like, the caseload in India and the number of cases they dispose of in a day is mind blowing. I've had some business development trips in India with my partners here based in Hong Kong, Australia, and Singapore, and they were just blown away with how so many matters are being solved by the Indian judges in one single day. So, obviously, there is, in terms of what can be done, I think we could incentivize pre-trial settlements. More than that, we definitely need more judicial officers and like the right balance in terms of getting the mindset towards less adversarial and more towards a win-win situation for both parties. So I think these are the three things, and I'm sure the legal systems are working towards it. Arbitrations are getting so incentivized anyway. But I think these were the very key case management differences, I would say. I can go on and on about substantive procedures as well, but I don't want to bore everybody.
Yes, thank you so much for elaborating it so much. That's something which is very welcome by learners. So, Urvashi, first of all, I want to now understand that you became a lawyer because you wanted and you loved talking and speaking. Has that played any role in the kind of leadership roles that you play and the way you interact with people, the way you work in the business development setups? How has it helped you in networking? How has it helped you in your legal practice, in reaching out to professionals, in training them, in making modules, in presenting yourself and your cases? That particular zeal that you have had, how has that particular aspect helped you build yourself, build your career, build your company as well?
Oh, thank you so much for that. As you know by now, I love speaking. And you're very right. I think what you really point out to the fact is two things. One is business development and one is networking and speaking to other people. Again, two skills that we are not taught at law schools and also not taught at a junior level, especially in Indian law firms or even other Indian legal professional practices. And suddenly, when someone becomes a partner, then they have to go out and find clients and then build their network and this business development. So it gets a little tough because you've not trained for it and then you're suddenly switching into a little different role. So wouldn't it be better if you start honing these skills right at the beginning of your career? So yeah, I think the fact that I do like to speak and it relatively comes naturally to me, and just reaching out to people comes naturally to me, does help a lot. How it helps is obviously initially, as I said, that is the reason how I got the job at Harney's, because I just networked a lot. I was making sure in the first 6 months that I was in Hong Kong, I was speaking to at least two new people a day. And these are connections from LinkedIn. I randomly cold message them. Some of them reply, some of them don't reply. Doesn't matter. Complete humility on that one. And as soon as someone does reply, then you have to follow up strongly to get that 30-minute slot with them. And then every time you talk to them, you need to make sure that you're taking something out of that conversation. Because, I mean, we could small talk all the time and we could just keep wasting both parties' times. But I think what's really important is the focus with how you do those conversations. And it doesn't need to sound like it has to be like a technical focused conversation, but it's just important to have at the back of your mind that you're doing this with a purpose, as against just like a random small talk, chill conversation with your friend. So I think those are the two things. How it helped me is A, I built that network. I also got this opportunity to lead Tone from the Top, which is a part of Women in Law Hong Kong, which is the largest women's legal network in Hong Kong. How that helps is A, I obviously come across as it's like a face of the firm, right? Like it's a way for the firm also to be recognized through me because I'm taking so many initiatives outside of my day job. So that helps in terms of your visibility and your perception from others. The other is you're going to be interacting with clients on a regular basis. So to hone these communication skills just makes you a more confident speaker and just gives that confidence and transitions into the client also being confident about you or taking up your services as a lawyer, because at the end of the day you can be a great lawyer, but if nobody knows about what you're doing and if you don't get the right clients, then how you're going to get more matters. So we all talk about the legal skills, like the technical skills, and those are extremely important. That is quintessential. That's the necessity. But then you need to complement that with communication skills, and you build that by practice. You build that by making sure that obviously every day is a little too much, but even though whilst you're working, you don't want to restrict yourself to the network you already have within your firm. Try to reach out to someone else. And we all say, oh, let's do conferences. But by doing conferences doesn't mean you're chatting with your own friends and sitting in that circle. You actually genuinely go out and try to go out of your comfort zone and talk to someone new. I think that's extremely important. And over the years, like now it's been 4 years at Harney's, like now you look back and you say, okay, I've built a network where I'm part of a South Asian lawyers group. I'm part of Women in Law Hong Kong. I'm part of International Women in Restructuring. So all these networks just help you firstly connect with clients, the most important part of this. And then other than that, also just build your own network, find mentors, find sponsors. So your perception in the firm gets better. So I think those are all key skills to have.
Something which is very important to be taught, not only to lawyers but to everyone across the globe, because the way you said that you made it a point that you reach out to two people at least every day. Connecting with two people every day makes so much difference in a whole year. That's your connection, and if they respond, nothing like it. That's such an
Yeah.
amazing advice, and the way you have followed it is obviously commendable, and that's why you are sitting and doing what you are doing right now. You, being a Hong Kong qualified lawyer, you also practice as an offshore lawyer for Cayman Islands, Bermuda, BVIs, and you have worked in India as well. So we would request you to shed some light on your understanding of key differences between the kind of cross-border transactions that we do or we practice in India in commercial and dispute resolution frameworks and the way they do it over there, because you are practicing there also predominantly. So, how do you see the difference, and how do you make sure that the client gets informed properly? Because that is something which is also very, very important everywhere around the world if you are dealing in clients, especially for business development and networking people. How do you do that?
I think the way I was working at a principal level, it's been the same, whether in India or in Hong Kong or practicing across jurisdictions. But obviously, the most important difference would be understanding the culture. Like clients in India work in a different manner as against clients, say, in Hong Kong. So I have a lot of Chinese clients, right? So the cultural differences is what you need to understand as well. For instance, there are some clients who are very keen to be hands-on involved in a complex matter. So then in that case, you need to constantly update them. Obviously, you need to do the updating to all clients anyway. But in that case, you need to keep responding to their queries. You need to keep ensuring that you're doing it in a manner that they understand. But at the same time, you're also covering your legal points because they should know what you're actually doing to support their case, for example. So I think in terms of differences between Indian commercial disputes and foreign commercial disputes, or at least the ones that I've worked on, is this that in India, as I said earlier, it's a little bit more adversarial. So a lot of times the clients would really want to be several steps ahead of the other client, and it gets like a little bit of a fight situation where there's a lot of emotion involved. Whereas when it comes to very highly complex and commercial matters here, also the nature of disputes I'm doing is different. I feel like eventually what they want is I'm mostly doing it for, say, creditors or the company. The company wants to pay their creditors back and creditors want their money back. and there's lesser emotions involved. So I think that was a little bit of difference. Obviously, if I was doing family matters here, or it may have been different. So I think that's where you need to go. So here, they want to make sure that you follow the timelines. The response time has to be immaculate. Like if they've asked for a response on the same day, then you have to give it. Similar for Indian clients as well. So I'm saying there are differences, but there's also several similarities. I mean, legal practice at the end of the day is pretty similar all across the globe. So, because your main aim is to understanding the client and then fulfilling your client's needs. I think that's literally in one sentence, if I can put it. And I think your other question was more about how do you manage these complex matters. And I think, again, that would be a little bit because I do cross border matters where I'm talking to Chinese clients on one hand and dealing with English law courts on the other hand, both having very different demeanors and cultural differences as well. And at the same time, a lot of times these same matters involve, say, other jurisdiction elements, so in the US or in the Hong Kong. So it's also time zone management that you need to do. But I think what really is most important is compartmentalizing. So if there is a day where I'm doing a Bermuda matter, BVI opinion, and a Cayman client call, then I just make sure that my structures are in place. So, for example, I actually genuinely have three different folders of all jurisdictions. Otherwise, you get confused. And there's one thing I don't do as often, but I can encourage everybody to do is keep reviewing these things that you are doing. For example, we were looking at billable hours and trying to get the hours, but maybe spend 3 or 4 hours on the weekend just reviewing some key new things that you've learned or key pieces, and then actually make like e-copy notes of those, so that what happens is you're building your own database. And once you build that database, you can always go back to it. So, it's easy to be like, oh, I did this complex advice. But then after 3 years, who's going to remember what the advice you yourself will forget because you've done so much. So I think organizing and structuring and then saving it in the right manner is a very underplayed skill. And I myself am guilty of that. I also just let go a lot of times because I've done it. I'm like, okay, it's done. But I think going back and reviewing your work or reviewing and saving it or just proper file management, as simple as that, can actually help you go a long, long way, especially when it comes to complex cases.
It definitely helps, although I'm also a guilty party where I never or hardly ever can go back because there is so much always on the plate that you have to work
Yeah,
on. But
yeah,
still, the part that you are talking about is reviewing. When you are talking about that, obviously it makes sense. If you review, you understand what changes you could have done to make it a better deal for anyone. So,
yeah.
keeping all this in mind, this talks about the way you like to work, the way you plan to work. So now we would love to talk about your guiding principles, the kind of motto that you have, the kind of ethics that you like to follow and like to see in the parties that you deal with. Because there are many a times, like it is said for law, that it is black and white in written format, but it usually is in gray area. So we sometimes encounter such kind of conflicts. So what kind of principles do you see or look at to make sure that first of all that conflict does not affect you for long, and you also can serve the client better, because obviously we are there to help them get through this particular process. So please do talk about your motto, your principles, your ethics, and the way you deal with clients.
Okay, this is a rather deep question. There is one thing, and maybe I've just been fortunate. I've not had a lot of cases or situations where I really did not believe in the client's case, or maybe because I'm that motivated to make sure that I help the client that I don't go very deep into what's right, what's wrong. But then again, it has to do with my practice because I do commercial matters. In commercial matters, there's usually less of a right and wrong. It's mostly either paying a party back or you're making sure that this company gets an efficient way of paying these other parties back. Like it's either or. So that way, I don't have a lot of dilemmas in terms of client practices, to be honest. But The principles that I follow, it's always been, and I've mentioned this earlier, as lawyers, you have to be extremely patient. You have to be extremely resilient. And apart from the usuals, which everybody says, which is hardworking, get your knowledge base right. I mean, I don't want to repeat on that because those are all quintessentials. You have to get your knowledge right. You have to get your advice right. You have to get all of that right. There's nothing you can do about it. There are long hours. But at the same time, how I look at it is from a very long term perspective. This is a profession where you're just constantly growing. It's so intellectually challenging and it's so stimulating that it keeps you on your toes. So, which is not what you get in a lot of other professions, especially because I'm doing disputes. I get to do very different matters on a daily basis. So, I think that's what keeps me excited and that's what keeps me going. When it comes to client management, it's the same thing. Just trying to make sure what the client needs. There are some clients who say, don't bother us, just do your work and get to it. And then there are some clients who want like an hourly update. So just knowing your clients, trying to cater to their needs, and then obviously doing your hard work, doing your best every day, bringing your best self. And to be honest, these are all like very principled answers. Like there are days when you really are struggling and you don't want to work beyond, say, 10 p.m. You don't want to do that. But a part of, honestly, anybody choosing the law should know this. It's a service based industry. And when you're servicing clients, then you need to know that you will not have a lot of control over your time. And it's not just me as a relatively medium term lawyer, or it's even partners. Like my partners even have to cancel their trips sometimes. Obviously, you shouldn't have to do that. But everybody says work life balance and all. But it is important to know that unfortunately, this is one of the perils of being in a service industry, and you need to be available for your client. Having said that, we've not spoken about this, but obviously doesn't mean that you just have to work all the time, because honestly, then you will get burnt out. And that's not just for law, that's for anything. There's one thing again for international law firms or international corporates as well. They really emphasize and ask you about your hobbies. Why they do that is not just because it's a question to ask at the end of the interview, but they genuinely want to know your interest outside of work. Why so? Because it actually keeps you motivated to then come back after the weekend of maybe doing whatever you like and then get back with more rigor and just a little bit more motivation, because you need that change. So, yeah, I think for me personally, that really helps. I really like sailing and windsurfing and all these activities which I get to do, thankfully, in Hong Kong. And one of the cultural differences, again, between Indian law firms and international law firms is as intense that workday will be, they will definitely try to honor your leaves and they will push you to take that break. And they will try not to disturb you during that break to the extent possible, because they know the value of that hobby or that break or that change into your actual work product, because it gets better. Like you come back more rejuvenated. So I think that's one last
So
parting
that is
difference.
not one love, that is very, very prominent thing. People should understand, not only in India, but many places they believe in working too much and putting in 24 hours a day workload kind of thing. When I entered law profession, I was questioned that after MBA, why did you need to do law? I was like, I guess I'll be a little bit of a better lawyer, probably because I'll be knowing how to do business. And that's
Yeah.
something every profession or every person in service
Yes.
industry understands. Because at the end of the day, it is about client, it is about you. Now that we are talking about this, I'll request you, as we are at the final note, to talk to the learners about how should they plan their not only career but their lives as well, in order to make sure that obviously there should be a balance. And if that balance is not always struck, they should not feel bad about it. Like you said, that there are many times when partners have to also sacrifice their holidays because of our work. So, how to manage that particular stress and how to make sure that they can enter that particular career that they are planning, be it national or international. But they should be content enough with what they are doing, and they should be doing that particular hard work in a smart way. not only the smarter work and no hard work. So somehow that is something which I guess you'll be the right person to talk about, because you have made that transition in between two jurisdictions. So please feel free to give nice and beautiful advices.
No, that's very kind of you. Yeah, I mean, actually, I was very fortunate. I don't know if you know about Ketan, but Ketan was a great place in terms of work culture. So I transition in that sense was relatively touch wood, very blessed. Really, this is the honest truth that both cultures at both the firms that I worked with in my career were great. So I had a good set of people I could rely on and good mentors, good sponsors, good learning. So that was there. But as I mentioned, you come into this profession, you should know that it's a service industry. So it's not a 9 to 5 job. It's really not. There are days when it's going to be very intense. And then there are days where maybe during the court vacation where you can ease a little bit. Having said that, again, I feel like a lot of times, and this is not just for law, but generally, people think spending longer hours in office or FaceTime is very important and that shows motivation. But unfortunately, again, I don't have to do that in my current firm, but that's really not the case. Like, if you're really good at what you do, then people will respect you for your work, and then you don't have to do these other peripheral sitting at work desk kind of things. Obviously, having said that, sometimes your seniors do want you to be in office because they want to make sure that you can discuss certain matters. It's just faster and quicker to discuss the matters, but at the same time it basically doesn't mean that you're whiling away time at work, because what that does is, I mean, and it's not easy. Like, I still understand those people who even sit because they think it's probably important to show face. But what I'm trying to say is that you can do that for a few years and then you'll get burnt out and then it'll impact everything else in your life. So I think every opportunity that you get, say it's a relatively easier day, you can just talk to your manager, go back home, and then again log back in if required. A lot of times I actually have to log back in because BVI Cayman Islands and Bermuda are the US time zone and we are in the Asia time zone. So a lot of my hearings also take place at say 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. in the night. And those are a few rare days that I have to, but at no point did I feel, oh no, it's so late. Why? Because my mindset is prepared for this to happen already. So I don't feel stressed if it's a long day as long as I know about it. Obviously, there are days when you'll not know about it and it'll be a long day. But, and there'll be some weekends that you have to work too. But I think that's really part of this profession. And it's not wrong if someone chooses not to be in this profession because of the intense work hours or the unpredictability of it. I think more than the work hours, it's actually the unpredictability, because a client query can come to you at any point or a matter can get adjourned to any specific day. I think that's really something to keep in mind. And if it's not for you, then it's not for you, which is why law school and internships and traineeships are very important, because they will give you that hands-on experience for you to know whether you even like this profession or which part of this profession do you want to be in. Academia is great as well. So that's something to explore. So yeah, that's about it. I think I'm blabbering a lot now.
No, you're not at all blabbering, and we enjoyed this particular interview with you. The conversation that we have had, I hope that our learners will get what they want from this interview, because this is also segmented, and in a way, you have explained so many aspects of not only practice but also life. And it has been an immense pleasure for both of us, me and Anshi from Super Lawyer team, to have this conversation with you. And thank you so much once again for giving us this much time. It has been an absolute pleasure today. Thanks, Urvashi, and all the best, and have a great evening ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Divya and Anshi. Really kind of you. And thank you for these amazing questions. They got me thinking too. So, really appreciate what you're doing for the legal community in India and how you're getting so many diverse professionals to actually come and learn from the experiences. And I just wanted to end by saying that I actually knew of Super Lawyer from the very beginning, from my law school days. And a lot of times when I thought about, when I was fidgeting the idea of preparing LLM, I actually used to go back to your interviews and read them and then reach out to people who had actually done an LLM. So I'm so glad that it's turned a full circle now. And thank you so much for having me.
Now,
Thank you so
now
much.
our learners will be learning from you as well. So thank you so much for being here.